Hello, welcome to the Resume Writing Part 1 workshop. In this lecture, or workshop, however you want to see it, we are going to talk about how to write a resume. We're going to be looking at content, and we're going to be looking at strategy. In the next lecture, we'll go more in depth on the design front, but design, content, and strategy are the three main criteria of a good resume. Now, before I begin, some of you already know this, that I have been working with resumes for about 3 years now. The NCRW by my name stands for Nationally Certified Resume Writer, so I was certified in 2015 by the National Resume Writers Association. And before then, I studied resumes a lot, and I've worked in a career center for over a year and helped a lot of clients with their resumes from very diverse backgrounds. And then I continue to do that today through my consulting business and through teaching this class and helping undergraduates like you get jobs on the job market. So the thing I'm going to say at the beginning of this is that teaching resume writing is kind of like coaching football. Okay, so going back to the football analogy. So there are rules about football, right? And there's really only a limited set of things that you can do in the game of football. But there's almost an unlimited set of philosophies that people have about how they execute the game of football. So every football coach essentially has their own system, right? So Nick Saban has his own system for how he runs his offense and how he runs his defense. Bill Belichick has his own system of offense and his own system of defense. Andy Reid has his own system of offense and defense. And each of their systems makes sense to them, and they're going to each have strengths and weaknesses in their approaches to playing the game. But each system will also have points of contention with other systems, right? So maybe Bill Belichick does one thing and Andy Reid goes, no, I want to do something different when it comes to this situation. So it's the same thing with resume writing. So there are a lot of great people out there. There's a lot of resources for how to write a resume. And I don't necessarily claim to be smarter than everybody else that does this kind of thing of teaching people how to write resumes. Everybody just has their own system and their way of doing things. And so the best that I can do in terms of that is within my system, I try to give a reason behind everything, a logical justification as to why I think you should do this instead of something else, okay? And ultimately, you're going to have to be the judge about what will work best for your resume and your situation, because people's situations vary. And so sometimes doing one thing doesn't make sense and you need to do something else. Okay. So if you're taking my class, what's important here is that you need to know how to write a resume. And so you cannot leave and graduate professional seminar without a decent competitive resume. Okay. So I'm going to expect you to write your resume according to the system that I'm proposing here, or that I'm teaching you here. And after you turn in your resume and get feedback and such, you're free to do whatever you want. Okay. So that's how we're going to do it. And hopefully this will be very helpful to you. And this is geared towards not just those of you who don't have a resume at all, but if you currently have a resume and you want to try to make it better, we're going to go through each section and show you how you can do that. So let's get to it. So there are 6 principles of resume writing, and I want to use these 6 principles as kind of like a framework that I'm going to constantly refer back to at various points in the lecture and in the next lecture as well. So I want you to remember these principles. The first thing about resumes is that there are really no rules, only preferences, okay? So this has a couple of implications. Number one, the first thing is that when there are rules or there are no rules and only preferences, we don't really think about resumes being right or wrong per se, because a lot of people are like, is my resume right? Is my resume wrong? And resumes aren't really math problems, okay? They're advertisements or persuasive documents. So a better measurement of a resume is more, is this resume effective or less effective. So you really want to think of it more as a continuum of effectiveness, okay? Now, people have different opinions about what they think is the most effective or the most persuasive, okay? So here's what's guaranteed to happen as you begin improving your resume and writing it and all of that. You might come to this class and you're going to get a whole system of how to do your resume, okay? And you'll get opinions about how to do this, how to do that, how to do this other thing. Then you might take it to your friend or you might take it to a recruiter. And the recruiter will go, oh no, but I don't like this, but I don't like that. Okay, so you're like, okay, well then two different opinions. Then you take it to a third person. Oh, but I don't like that, I don't like this. So then you get all this contradictory information, right? And it's like, well, this one person likes this, but then I talked to this other person, they said, no, keep it. And then this third person said this. Okay, welcome to the world of resume writing, where there's no rules, only preferences. So once again, you have to just take each advice and think about, does this make sense in my situation? Because remember, ultimately the resume is about you, right? It's your job, you're the one applying for it, you're the one who's going to be interviewing based on this resume. So you want to make sure that whatever you put, that you're most comfortable with, okay? But there are no rules, only preferences. Think in terms of effectiveness, not correctness. This leads to the second. Resumes are advertisements, not obituaries, okay? Resumes are advertisements, not obituaries. So the point of a resume is not just to inform me where you've worked the past 20 years. The point of the resume is to convince me that you will be a great candidate or a great employee for this job that you're applying for, okay? So you have to sell your accomplishments. You have to sell yourself in your resume, and you need to convince us of something, okay? So too often people just put their work history and they just put responsibilities, and then they just put their education, and it's just, there's nothing compelling about it, okay? What you have to do in the resume is you have to convince me through your summary, through your accomplishments, through your awards, through your education, through your cover letter, that you are the one for the job, okay? So you have to take a sales mentality, not a teaching mentality when it comes to resumes. Think of it as the difference between persuasive speaking and informative speaking, okay? So you got to sell. Thirdly, you are what you emphasize. So this is very important because in resumes, you're often limited to a page. Now, most new graduates should be a page long, okay? And you should at least fill 75% of the page, and you really shouldn't go over one. Now, there are going to be some rare cases where you might go over one as a new graduate, and if you think you're that case, let me know and we can talk about it. But for the most part, pretty much all of you are going to have a one-page resume. So in that one-page resume, if 75% of what you talk about is public relations, okay, then I'm going to think that your resumes, you're targeting public relations jobs. It's just like if I gave a 5-minute speech about, if I gave a 5-minute speech and 4 minutes of it were about turtles, okay, then I'm mostly going to remember the stuff you said about turtles, right? Because you talked about it for 4 out of the 5 minutes, okay? So as you're transitioning jobs and you're trying to show that you're going from experience A to experience B, you want to emphasize the things that would be relevant to experience B, okay? So you have to emphasize the right aspects of yourself for the job that you're trying to apply for, which means that you might have to leave some other things off that aren't as relevant. The fourth thing is that everything in the job search is an argument. So this is important because you have to think of it not as, am I allowed to say this in my resume? Am I allowed to say that my education should be substituted for experience? Sure. There is no like rule. It's all an argument. So if you want to make the argument that your education should be substituted for your experience, argue that in your cover letter. Argue that in your summary. Okay? So everything in the job search is an argument. You get to argue whatever you want. Okay? It's going to be up to the audience, the people reading your resume, whether they buy it or not. But there's no rules about what you can and can't argue, okay? If they buy your argument, great, now you'll get an interview. If they don't buy your argument, well, then they say no, okay? So think of every step of the process as an argument. I want to argue that my, public relations classes make me prepare to be a director right out of undergrad. I don't know. Something like that. Well, if you can support the argument with evidence and reasons, and you can compellingly present a resume that can make that case, then do it. But think of it as an argument. The fifth principle. A shallow selection process requires firm attention to shallow details. So here's kind of one of the facts of life about hiring. Usually in the first round of selection, okay, jobs can have 50 to 100 to 200. I mean, there's it just depends on where the job is posted and what it is and all that. But it's going to be there's going to be a large number of applicants for any job that you apply for, okay? And you can expect easily 50. I mean, it just depends on the job, but I would say at least 50. So you have a 1 in 50 chance of getting the job, okay, in the first round, okay? Now, what's probably going to happen is the HR people or the recruiter or whoever's looking at it, they're going to have a stack of resumes, okay, of 50 resumes. And they're going to have to quickly cut down the pile to something manageable. Now that might be 10 or 8 or 12. Just depends on how they're setting up the hiring process. So more than likely, on the first time they see your resume, they're just skimming through things, okay? And they're looking at it very shallowly. They're speed reading it, okay? And they're maybe giving it like 15 seconds at most to read it. So you have to pay attention to the shallow details because they're looking at it shallowly. So if your resume is all messy and disorganized, in that 15 seconds, that's going to be one of the major things that they see, okay? So you have to be very detail-oriented with these things because they are shallow. The hiring process is quite shallow, to be honest. And so you have to be very clean on that level. And lastly, the rhetoric of resumes often lies in order and presentation. Okay, so when we start talking about strategy, the things that you put first are going to often be the most memorable. Okay, if you put your education first, it seems like then you're claiming that that's your best asset, right? And if you're a new graduate and you don't have a lot of experience, you probably should put your education first. If you're putting your experience first, that's probably going to say you're selling that. And then presentation is going to be all about design. And design, we're going to talk about the next lecture. So these are 6 very important principles that you need to keep in mind as we go through resume writing. And remember, the operative principle as well is relevance. You always want to be thinking about what's going to be relevant to the job posting. And so that's something else that you want to keep in mind. Okay, so the first thing you want to do before you start writing your resume is you want to figure out what your job target is. And the job target is basically just the job that you are wanting to apply for. Now, I recommend that the job target be less than 2 weeks old. That's because you don't want to spend all this time writing a resume that's, perfect, but then you go to apply for the job and the job's already been filled, okay? And the posting of jobs is an interesting thing in itself because it's hard to know how quickly a company is going to move on a job posting. So, I've heard of one study where 2 weeks is about how long it takes before recruiters start calling people after the job posting gets posted. But, I've heard of situations where companies call people a month and a half, 2 months later. It just depends on a lot of things. So I usually say if you apply within the first 2 weeks, you're probably safe. If you're in the 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I don't know, it's up in the air, but probably a month and after, I don't know. I just feel like it's a little bit less certain whether that job's been filled or not, okay? And sometimes the problem is that a job will get filled, but the posting will stay open just because nobody's taken it down, and that creates even more like confusion and uncertainty. So I recommend less than 2 weeks old, just because I think that's pretty much the safest time period for applying for something. The other thing is you want to pay attention to keywords, okay? So keywords are nouns related to the job posting that are usually skills, okay? And we're going to look at an example of job postings and how to look at keywords here in a second. So there's two really good resources to kind of figure out what keywords are. The first one is wordcounter.net here. And what you do is you copy and paste the job posting into the word counter. And so you can see this is the job posting for, I think it's public relations assistant. And so the job's posted in here. And then right here, under keyword density, it tells you the most commonly repeating words and how often they appear, okay? So what you want to do is you want to go to the job posting and you want to look for key skills and nouns. So here, marketing is a skill, management is a skill, media is a skill, design is a skill. So you probably want to mention something about promotions, project management, okay? And then these are words that you want to try to work into your resume somehow. Because especially since these repeat a lot, you definitely want these words somewhere in there. But then you should go to the job posting itself as well. So if you can mention print, digital, or media, you know, develop web content for websites, so you want to mention web content. You know, if you can talk about special events. So the idea is to try to use the words that they use in your resume, okay? So that's another thing. And so you have to speak their language. And like, let's say you're applying for customer service jobs. And let's say on your resume, you didn't call them customers, you called them clients, okay? Now, even though customers and clients are essentially the same thing, but just, you know, different frame, client and customer are two different words. So you won't get credit for those keywords if you use clients. You have to use the word customer. So definitely pay attention to keywords, because the part of the issue is that when you submit your job, your resume online to an applicant tracking system, okay, so these are an ATS, and I explained this in another, I'll explain this in another video. Basically, ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System, okay? And applicant tracking systems are basically databases that keep track of applicants who apply for a job. So when you submit your resume online to a company or to a job board, it's not going to go to a human right away. It's going to go to this ATS system, this applicant tracking system. And this applicant tracking system is going to parse the resume and keep it in the database. And then when it's time to make hiring decisions, the HR person or the recruiter or whatever is going to go to the ATS, and they might try to cut down the pile initially based on resumes that bring up keywords. So what happens is sometimes people just randomly apply for jobs online that they're not even qualified for. So rather than having to sift through 100 different resumes, they might try to cut down the pile to 50 based on the fact that people who aren't qualified wouldn't naturally bring up words like these, right? So if I'm some, like, I don't know, art teacher and I'm trying to get into PR, I may not have these words in my resume naturally because I have no experience doing it. So the ATS system then will then show that, like, you have a very low keyword match, so you're probably not qualified. Okay, great, we don't even need to open your file. You see what I mean? So you have to make sure that your resume has these keywords in there so you can make sure that, or so that you can ensure that you will make it past the ATS cut and that you appear qualified on computer at least, okay? So have keywords in your resume, pay attention to the job posting, and incorporate these in your writing. Another source you can use, so wordcounter.net is free. You have jobscan.co, okay? And this is a really good website. Now you have to pay for this one. You do get 5 free scans initially, but then after that you have to pay for it. And what's nice about jobscan.co is you copy and paste your resume into one box, and then you copy and paste the job posting into another box. And then jobscan.co will tell you your keyword match. So it'll say like resume, here are the keywords that you have in your resume. Here's the keywords in the job posting. So you have sales 15 times, publications, you don't have it, but the job posting mentions it 5 times, 3 times here for publishing. Okay, so jobscan.co will tell you what keywords are missing in your resume, or at least ones that you're not bringing up that appear to come up a lot in the job posting. So jobscan.co is great. I use it a lot, and I think that the average job seeker could benefit a lot from it as well. And it does have problems sometimes, like sometimes it doesn't count words that I think would be important, just doing the manual underlining of nouns. So sometimes it does miss a few important words, but it's still incredibly useful. It gives you at least a ballpark of where you need to be in terms of keywords. So jobscan.co is great. I would highly recommend it if you can afford it. I think it's like 20 bucks a month, but I'm not sure. Okay, so you've looked at the job posting now, and you're aware of keywords, you know what they're looking for, and you believe you're qualified for this job. So now what we need to do first, before we start writing your resume, is we need to figure out why do you think you deserve this job? Like, why do you think you're qualified for it? Because that's the most fundamental question of the job search, right? Why should you be hired? Okay? Because remember, there's, thousands of people, hundreds. Well, there's thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people on the job market, but there's going to be dozens, if not hundreds of people applying for this job that you're going to be applying for. So you have to be able to answer the question, why you? Why you? Why not candidate number 74? Why not candidate number 3? Why not candidate number 125? Why you? Okay? So this is where you have to identify your selling points. Okay? You have to know why you should be hired. So, why should an employer hire you? Now, if you want, and you want to take a minute to pause this video and maybe think about this a little bit, think about your key selling points. I want you to think of 3. I think everybody should have at least 3 selling points. Okay, so 3 reasons why. Okay. Now, you want these reasons to be complete sentences. You don't want just customer service, 5 years experience. Okay. Well, what about 5 years experience? Okay. What about customer service? Okay. So 3 complete sentences why you should be hired. Okay. So if you want to pause this video, go ahead and do that now. Okay. So when I usually have people do this exercise, okay, in the workshop context or in the classroom context, usually people will come up with at least 2. Some people will struggle to come up with 3, which is okay, I guess, but you want to try to have 3 because things just go well in 3s, and you don't want to put all of your stock in just one selling point, because if that selling point misses, then you put all your eggs in one basket essentially. But here's the 2 common things that I see when I have people identify selling points that I think will help them a lot in their job search. So I call them success formulas, okay? And one of them is personal attributes. So a lot of people, when they pick their selling points, they'll say something like, I'm very dependable, or I'm very easygoing, or I'm very, I don't know. I mean, any kind of personal attribute that is about their personality quality, or I'm very people-oriented, something like that, okay? So that's how they'll say their selling point. Well, I'm dependable. Okay? So here's the problem with formulating it that way, okay? If you ever have to interview people, everybody says they're dependable, right? Like anybody can say I'm dependable, right? Even like the least dependable person in the history of the universe could say I'm dependable, okay? And so as an interviewer, you just kind of take it with a grain of salt, right? Well, of course anybody's going to say that. You know what I mean? So you really need something to back this up, right? Because anybody can say that. So here's what I recommend. Here's the first formula. Okay? Or oops, I actually hit next. So here's the formula for personal attributes. I call it headline plus story. So how you want to phrase this isn't just, why should we hire you? I'm dependable. How you want to phrase it is something like this. Why should we hire you? Well, I'm very dependable. At my previous job, I was charged with keeping track of all of the keys and making sure that I could arrive at work 15 minutes every day early to make sure that everybody can come in, and I never missed a day. Okay, that's a lot better because now I can see how you're dependable, right? So you have a headline, right? I'm dependable, and you have a story. You have some example that it shows that you're very dependable, right? You had the keys, you came to work on time every day or early, and you never lost a key, okay? So now I have something to latch onto rather than just your word, or at least I have an example that shows that you have this kind of attribute, and it's not just you saying it, okay? So headline plus story. So one of your selling points, or maybe two of them, are going to maybe be personal attributes. And what you want to do is not just say, I'm very dependable, but then you want to find an example or some kind of story that can show that you have this potential. Then there's experience, okay? So a lot of people, especially like my mid-career people, will try to claim experience as a selling point, okay? And usually what they'll say is something like this. I have 10 years experience. Okay, so experience is good, right? And we like experience, but there's two problems with that formulation, okay? Okay, so you have 10 years experience. So what if somebody else who applies has 15? So do they win? So that's the first problem. The second problem is this, and those of you who have worked for a while can probably relate to this. Just because you're experienced doesn't necessarily mean you're good at your job, right? You can probably think of somebody who you've worked with who's been at that company for a very long time, and you kind of wonder, like, who are they sleeping with? Or like, how do they still here? Like, how have they not been fired? So experience doesn't necessarily mean proficiency, right? Experience just means you showed up, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you were good at what you do. And here's the thing. Companies aren't filling positions just to fill positions. Companies fill positions because they want particular results. So they just don't want people who are experienced. They want people who are excellent at producing results. So here's the formula that you want to use. The old formula that people tend to use is number of years experience plus X and Y duties, okay? So most people, when they put it in a sentence, they'll put it like this. I have 5 years experience doing customer service management, okay? So number of years experience plus duties, okay? Here's the new formula, all right? So here's the new formula. I'm going to put it in a different color too, just to make it new. Okay, new formula. Number of years success bringing X and Y results. So instead of, I have 5 years experience as a customer service manager, you can say something like this. I have a 5-year successful record, making sure that customers are happy, improving customer satisfaction scores, and running an effective customer service management team. So there, you're emphasizing the results. I can increase your scores. I can make sure your customers are happy. I can make sure that your team runs effectively. That sounds a lot better and more convincing than just, oh, I have 5 years experience as a customer service manager, because I have no idea if you were good. But here, I can see some results now. Now you're speaking my language as the employer. You see what I mean? So as a new graduate, you may not be able to be at this level yet, but try to think of what you have been successful at and sell those results and those years of success. So even if you're just working part-time for the past 3 years at a retail store, talk about what you did successfully at a retail store, if you're going to talk about experience. So this is good for both mid-career and early graduate people. Okay, so now you have your selling points, but these selling points are good for a lot of things. So they're going to be good for the resume because they're going to be part of your summary. So these 3 selling points that you just came up with, and hopefully you've improved now, will be on your resume. These selling points will also be useful for the interview. The simple question, why should we hire you? You can answer with your selling points. They'll also be useful for your LinkedIn profile. You can put this in your summary. It's also useful for face-to-face networking. You can always bring these up in your conversation. So in all 4 aspects of the career ecosystem, the selling points are useful. Now, to make them useful for the resume, what we have to do next is we have to put them in resume speak. So resume speak is a way of writing resumes that by convention, it's just a conventional way of writing resumes, essentially. It's just the way, it's a convention that people follow, and it's very business-oriented, very efficient, and it violates some of your English grammar rules, and let's look at it a little bit more in depth. So in resume speak, you don't use I. So in your resume, you should not have the word I in there at all. Because your name is at the top, everything is presumed to be about you. Because you wouldn't write a resume about someone else, right? So at that point, the resume is about you. And so everything that's written about you doesn't need I because it's already implied to be about you, if that makes sense. So you don't use I in a resume. So what you do then is you use action verbs, adverbs, and adjectives to begin sentences. So instead of I am a customer service manager, you would just put customer service manager offering 5 years experience if you're going to start with a noun. If you're going to do action verbs, you're going to talk about accomplishments or duties. Instead of saying I ran the customer service team, you would just put oversaw customer service team. Okay? So you start with action verbs, adverbs, adjectives to begin sentences. Okay? So think of it as you drop the I and then you talk about yourself in the third person. Okay? So it's written in third person without the I. Well, in third person would mean it doesn't have the I anyways. Okay, so yeah, written in third person. Okay. You eliminate articles, so a, and the. So instead of saying I helped the manager with a project, you would just put assistant manager with project. Okay? It's perfectly fine. It's resume speak. We are trying to make it as efficient as possible, and so you don't worry. You're not sounding like Tarzan when you're on a resume when you're writing a resume. Okay? So don't have articles. For past jobs, use past tense. Okay? So if you don't work at this job anymore, so you're doing your work history and you are done with this job and you're just not working there anymore, then it's all past tense because you don't work there anymore. For current jobs, use the present tense. Now, present tense isn't the ing, okay? Present tense would just be the verb. So, for example, if you're currently a sales person, you don't put selling cars for used cars for car lot or whatever. You would just put sell used cars for car lot. Okay. So you don't use us, you don't use ing, you just use the verb in its regular form. Okay. Also, you want to try to use numerals for numbers because writing out 52,000 is takes a long time to read. You can just put 52K, or 52K with a dollar sign if it's money. Okay. So you try to use numerals for numbers where possible, and make sure you stay consistent. And also, resumes are written in reverse chronological order. So that means you start with the present first, and then you work to the oldest. Okay? That's true with your work history. That's true with your education. It's pretty much true with everything, even your organization. So you always start with the most recent first, and then you work backwards. And that's it for resume speak. And you're going to see some examples of this in a second. But what I want to do now is talk about 3 general formats of resumes. And so these are essentially 3 different strategies that you can have in the setup of your resume. Okay? And so you have the chronological, the functional, and the combination format. And we're going to talk about each of these here with an example. So the chronological format of resumes highlights the work history, duties, and accomplishments. Okay? So the thing to notice here is that in this resume, the majority of the page is experience. Okay, so all of this professional experience here, all of this, like the majority of this, like I'd even say about 65% or 70% is professional experience. So it's highlighting the work experience part. And this is bullet point format, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And here he's talking about his duties and his accomplishments. Okay, so that's what chronological format is. I'm very you have very relevant experience for the job, and you have an accomplished work history. This is when you use chronological format. So you've been working in sales jobs for a while, and you're applying for another sales job, then do chronological format because it makes the most sense. Your experience lines up with the position quite well to where you can just talk about your experience and your accomplishments there and just sell what you've done in the past. And you also have a very accomplished work history is another reason you might do chronological format. So in that case, yeah, go through your work history, talk about how you've kicked butt at all these different jobs. Okay? So that's when you want to use that. Secondly, you have the functional format. The functional format minimizes your emphasis on work history and instead emphasizes your accomplishments. So here, look how small the work history is. Okay, so it's just this little bit right here. And what's also noticeable is he doesn't sell anything under each job. He just kind of lists where he was and when. Most of the selling is happening in a different spot. It's happening in the summary and in the key skills section. Okay, so why would you use a functional format? Okay, there's a couple of reasons, well, really few reasons why you might use functional. One reason might be because you have a problematic work history. So if you've changed jobs a lot, you don't really want to sell the gaps. So the work experience kind of minimizes that fact. Okay. You also might use it if you don't have relevant experience. So if you were to go through your work history and to do your descriptions and accomplishments, there's just nothing really relevant to what you're trying to go for. So at that point, you might use a functional format for that. And the thing is, though, with functional resumes, is from most people who you talk to, recruiters and HR people and such, functional format resumes are just not preferred usually. And it's just, a lot of times people will see that as kind of a red light when they see a functional resume. So it's kind of one of those Hail Mary type things where you know that a chronological just won't work for you. Just try your best with the functional and hope for the best. But there are also negative situations where a functional resume actually might be good. I know like with blue collar workers, like technically he's a blue collar guy. And so in their case, they might do functional because they change jobs a lot anyways, because their jobs are often seasonal. And a lot of them have a wide ranging skill set. So they might sometimes be better off doing functional because of the fluid nature of their work. Okay, so that actually might be a case where you're using functional because it's actually best, not because you're like in a bad spot per se. Okay, so but that's what a functional format is. I don't really think any of you in my class will need to do this format. I think there should be a way to where you can do chronological or you can do combination format, which is the next format. Combination format does a little bit of both. It does the little bit of the chronological, and it does a little bit of the functional format in that it emphasizes a skills section and a work history. Now, this sample resume actually is 2 pages, but I'm just showing the first page. But here she has a long summary, and then she has a skills section, a key proficiencies section with all her keywords that she wants to fill. And then the last 2 pages are her work experience, and it's very spelled out, as you can see here with description and accomplishment. And then she has her education as well. So a combination format does a little bit of both. Use it when you're applying for very hard skilled jobs, especially this section right here. If you're applying for IT jobs, they often look for, do you know this program or that program or this? So having a skills section or a key proficiencies section is very useful for that. I also highly recommend it when you're a very accomplished candidate, okay? And you just have a really good work history, a lot of good accomplishments. And I really think accomplishments should be contextualized in the work history, so then we know the capacity by which you reach these accomplishments. So I can look at district sales manager here, and then it makes sense. Oh, you manage 2 high volume stores in Kansas City and St. Louis. Okay, cool. You know what I mean? And I can see the context for it in the work history. And as long as you make it stand out, they'll still see it. Okay. So the trade-off to combination format, though, is that it's the most space consuming. So she's doing a 2-page resume as a result. But she's in a position where she can do that because she has the experience. So usually you go 2 pages, usually either because you're highly accomplished or you have at least, you know, the number's a little bit fluid, but I'd say about 10 to 15 years experience. I think it's okay to go 2 pages. But it really also depends on your format and your design. Some people go 2 pages unnecessarily because they have a very inefficient design, and to where you really could make this 1 if you designed it right. Okay, so that's that. Now let's talk about sectional formats. So what I just showed you were overall resume formats. So these are just ways to set up your resume in general. The sectional formats are formats within each section of a resume. Okay, so you have the overall format. I'm going to do summary, work experience, and education. That's what we were talking about before. Now what we're talking about is within the summary, how do I format? Within the work experience, how do I format? And within education, how do I format? So the first sectional format is called paragraph format. So here we have, a summary section here, and it's, accomplished registered nurse, 15-year record, successfully anticipating patient needs and ensuring full recoveries. Notice how this is written in resume speak. Starts with an adjective, talks about herself in the 3rd person. Proficient evidence-based care and emergency response, praised by hospital for interpersonal skills and consistent abilities to build trusting relationships with patients. Notice there's no articles. So this is resume speak right here. Okay, this is how you will sound on your resume. Now, paragraph format is simply that. It's a paragraph, okay? You just paragraph of text, no big deal. One thing I should mention, and I do mention this in the other lecture too, in the design lecture, you really don't want your paragraphs longer than 5 lines because it becomes hard to speed read. So if you have something longer than 5 lines, either cut it or start a new paragraph. Then you have bullet point format. So bullet point format is where you make each sentence a bullet point. So these are the exact same texts, but just formatted differently. So what's nice about paragraph format is that it's very space efficient, right? This only takes up about 3 lines, which is nice. The difficulty with the trade-off to paragraph format is that nothing really stands out, right? Everything is kind of clobbered together. So, nothing really is going to stand out. I have to read the whole thing to see it. What's nice about bullet point format is, everything can stand out, right? Because it's bullet pointed. The problem is that, and it doesn't apply in this case, but in other cases, bullet point format is very space inefficient, right? Because every single sentence you have to start a new line, okay? So bullet point format takes up a lot of vertical space. And if you're trying to save space, it's going to be the least efficient. The third is combination format. Combination format is where you do a little bit of paragraph and a little bit of bullet point. So let's say with this summary, I really want to highlight this part. Well, with combination format, I can make the first two sentences a paragraph, and then the last point, to make it stand out, make it a bullet point. That way, that third point really stands out to my reader, and they won't miss that part. Now, again, what's nice about combination format is then you can make things stand out. But for it to really work, you have to be consistent within the section. So if you're going to do work experience as combination format, you got to make sure you have description and accomplishment for every job. And you want to try to make them about even, right? Because it would be kind of weird if like your first job had 5 bullet points or like 3 bullet points, and then all your other jobs had like 1 or 0, right? So with combination format, you have to really commit to it and be consistent within a section if you're going to go that route. What you don't want to do within a section is have one job description be combination, another be paragraph, another one be bullet point, and just keep switching. You want to stay consistent. And combination format can sometimes save space, sometimes it can be more space consuming. So it just depends. Okay, so now we're going through the different sections of a resume. And so let's start with the header, okay? So the header is pretty straightforward. What you want to have is you want to have your name big at the top. And this isn't the only way you can do a header. There's a lot of ways you can format and design and style headers. So this is just a starting example one. So don't feel like this is the only way it can look. But here are the key ingredients in a header. You want to have city, state, and zip code. You don't really need your street address because people don't mail stuff anymore. They don't really need to know if you live in an apartment or in a house. When people look at your address on a resume, all they really want to know is, do you need to relocate? And they can tell that by city, state, and zip code. Otherwise, you're taking up more space in the header, makes you less space efficient. Okay, so this is all you need. You need your email address, and you want to make sure that you have a professional email address, something that's a version of your first and last name. So if you're at A-State, you can use your astate.edu email address. It's perfectly fine. You're a student. But you want to have something that is professional sounding, not cutegirl17@yahoo.com. Something that won't make us judge you based on your resume or your email address. Just need one phone number on your resume, the one that you can be best reached at. Probably your cell phone, right? It's the one that you answer. And, you pretty much can assure that if you don't answer it, you can get a voicemail and it'll go to you and they'll know it goes to you, okay? So I recommend your cell phone. That way, if somebody else answers, they're not representing you or forgetting to tell you that somebody called. When you have a LinkedIn profile, putting your LinkedIn on your resume is perfectly fine too. Hey, you want people to go there. Your LinkedIn is going to make you four-dimensional, okay? It's going to make you more human being-like, and it's going to be nice. So you want to do that with your LinkedIn. Now, if you're going to do a 2-page resume, then you need to also make sure on page 2 you have an abbreviated header. So on page 2, you'll still have your name. It doesn't have to be as big from the first page, but you still want it big. And then your email, phone number, and something indicating page 2. Okay, now summary profile. So you start off your resume by stating your value, summarizing your candidacy. So the summary is essentially, if you don't read any other part of my resume, read the top part, and here are the takeaways, okay? And the summary is essentially your case, basically, for why you should be hired, okay? So here, the summary is a big part of the resume. Now, this is also a 2-pager, but it's going to have some paragraph with some accomplishments and with some key proficiencies. Now, I require that everybody in my class have summary sections instead of objective sections, okay? So the most common thing I'll see is people will have objective. And here's usually what their objective says. Objective, to get a job using my skills and abilities in this field. Well, no duh, you applied, right? You applied for the job, so clearly that's your objective. So to me, it's just not a good use of space. It doesn't really inform us of anything, and it's basically implied by the fact that you've applied for the job. So I like summary because what it does is it tells us the value that you add right away. And it does the other work of making sure that whoever reads your resume they're getting the key takeaways. They're getting your selling points out of it. Okay? So I highly recommend having a summary if you're not in my class, and you are required to have a summary if you are in my class. And what you want it to be, basically, your summary is your selling points that we did earlier in resume speak. So take those 3 selling points that you wrote out in just normal English and put it in resume speak. So drop the I, make it third person, and make it resume speak oriented. Drop the articles, and there you go. You have the foundation for a summary. Okay? So you can do paragraph format, you can do bullet point format, you can do combination if you think you have enough. But a summary is basically your selling points in resume speak. They are the takeaways. Now, people can call them different things. Some people call it the summary section, some call it the highlights, some people call it profile. There's different synonyms you can use for the word summary, okay, or executive summary or whatever. But it's all the same idea, which is basically, here are the takeaways, okay? And it's a little bit more, it's quite more advanced than just objective to get a job using my skills and abilities. Well, no duh, everybody does. So here's an example of a summary, one that you can read and understand. So just looking at some things here, once again, you have 3 selling points in bullet point formats, okay? Versatile office management, human resources professional, offering 10 years combined experience, providing game-changing administrative support, ensuring productive company culture, and practicing outstanding customer service. They have the success formula in here. She's not just saying office management, human resources professional with 10 years experience. She's talking about the value that she's adding, the results that she brings. Okay, you're speaking the employer's language now. Okay, notice that there's no I, there's no articles in this, and it's 3 really good selling points right at the top that we can walk away with, and it makes a really good first impression. Because remember, people read resumes from the top down. So the very first sentence, the very first thing that they're gonna see is what your summary says. And you really want that sentence to be good, and you really want that first selling point to be awesome. Okay? So you always want to put your strongest first when it comes to these things. And so there she does it, and so this is how you kind of want your summary to look like as well. So once again, summary, selling points in resume speak. The next section is called key proficiencies. Now, you might have this in your resume, you might not, okay? And then you might have it in its own section called key proficiencies like this person does, or you might have it integrated in the summary, okay? But key proficiencies basically are keywords in a section, and usually they're hard skills, okay? So for this job, which was a project management systems administrator job, she needed a lot of key proficiencies, right? Because there's a lot of hard skills you have to know, TCL, SMS, those kinds of things. Different healthcare systems, HIPAA, insurance, medical records, all of that. So the key proficiencies section is kind of a new thing, or like a newer thing than what maybe your English teacher taught you 30 years ago. And so the reason you have this section is to make sure that you hit on keywords, number 1. But also, recruiters really like this section too, because if they're sifting through resumes, a lot of times they're looking for very, very specific talent. And so when they can just go to this section and see, okay, does this person know this program, or do they know this software, or do they know this thing? The key proficiencies section makes that very clear right away, okay? So it's just very easy identification. So there's different ways you can do it. And so you can do the bullet point format or the different table formats. Sorry, I thought I had a transition there, but I guess not. Okay, so work experience. Okay. There's 3 different parts to work experience, okay? And one part is the job information, okay? And so the job information will have a few parts to it. First, you're going to have the position title. So here you have National Senior Account Manager. And then you have the name of the company, Skill Path Seminars. And then city and state. And then month and years. Now, a couple of notes here. I highly recommend if you didn't advance within a company, so you're going from company A to company B in your work history, and there's no advancement within, You probably want to sell the job title first more than you want to sell the company, right? So remember, the most important thing should come first, okay? The strongest thing should come first. So if I'm trying to sell that I'm experienced, the thing that will sell that is my job title. So I really want to list my job title first. If my company is just this amazing, prestigious, whatever company, then maybe I'd list my company first. But probably in most cases, you really want to put the job title first, because that's the thing you want to sell, that you've held this job title, not just that you worked at some company, okay? So sell the position title first. The second aspect is, as far as dates, you want to try to have months and years, okay? There are times when you may just do years only, but for the most part, I recommend having months. HR people like months, recruiters like months, so I would do months, okay? And if you don't remember the exact month, ballpark, plus or minus 1 month, maybe 2 months off isn't probably going to be a big deal, okay? So those are the major things that you're going to want to have in job information part of work experience, but there's still more. The second part of work experience, so you have the job information. The second part is description. And this is where you use action verbs and resume speak to talk about your duties in that job. So in work experience here, we have spearhead business development for sales and for a professional training company, prospect new business opportunities in manufacturing, healthcare, government. So notice we're starting with action verbs: prospect, close sales, coordinate trainers, coach. And this is a job that he currently holds, so we're using present tense, okay? We're not using past tense yet because we're still working here. And what we're doing is we're talking about duties and skills that we're applying. Coordinate trainers, map curricula, ensure maximal customer satisfaction. So remember the job equation. Remember, job equals skills plus identity plus pay. What you're doing is, in your description, is you're breaking down what this job is. So what is a national account manager? Well, they use certain skills. What skills? Well, this is where you describe the skills that they use, okay? And then you're identifying it as, account manager, all right? So you have to break down your job into the skill sets that are applied to uphold it. And then you put those in resume speak in sentences. Now he's doing paragraph format here for this part, so that's fine. And there you go. Now there's the third part of work experience, okay? And even if you're currently in college, you want to start thinking on this level. Accomplishments. Anything that demonstrates excellence or proficiency at your job can be considered an accomplishment, okay? So a lot of people think accomplishments just have to be awards. Yes, awards are accomplishments, but they're not the only kind of accomplishments, okay? You can have measurable quotas, commissions, or productivity. So did you produce a lot of stuff? Did you make a lot of sales? Did you produce whatever? Any kind of mark of productivity that's good, okay? That can be an accomplishment. Being asked to take on more responsibility. They don't give more responsibility to people who don't know what they're doing. They give it to people who are trustworthy. Talk about those additional responsibilities. Even if it wasn't a promotion per se, it's still additional responsibilities. That says something about you. Being promoted, of course, should be an accomplishment. If you get a bonus, put that on there. Excellent performance evaluations. Now, even people who work part-time jobs have these. So talk about your performance evaluations. If they are good, which hopefully they are, because you want to be good at your job, put that on there. You know what I mean? So put that in a sentence. Earned excellent scores on customer service and attentiveness and annual performance evaluations. Something like that. That's an accomplishment. Any kind of praise or acknowledgement from customers, supervisors, or coworkers can be an accomplishment. You can put quotes from them. You can say you were praised by customers for X, Y, and Z on customer satisfaction surveys. A lot of ways you can do this one. And you can also just put succeeding in a project or duty assigned. Look, technically, if you worked in a job you have accomplishments. If you've been there for more than 90 days and you haven't been fired, you probably have some accomplishments, because really accomplishments are just this: proof that you did your job well, right? So just think about, at your job, how are you evaluated? What are the key results that are expected of you? Have you delivered those results? Okay, to what degree? Talk about them. And there you go. You have accomplishments. So don't think that like accomplishments are these like high level awards, and just salesman of the year, and all that stuff. I mean, those are good, and put those on there, but don't limit yourself to just those things. So here's an example from the previous resume. So we have the description up here, in which I cut off to make room for the accomplishments here. So the accomplishments are given their own little section, okay, and they have the bullet points here. And now these are in past tense. So even though the description is in present tense, the accomplishments can be in past tense because you've already done those things, okay? So it's a little, it might sound a little confusing at first, but if you currently have a job, description can be in present tense, accomplishments can be in past tense, okay? Because these are things that you've done. The description are things that you're still doing, okay? So, and you just kind of list, what are you proud of, okay? Consistently placed in the top 7 highest grossing sales managers for 11 consecutive years. Okay, cool, this is the place where you sell, okay? Because if you just had just duties and if you just, all you had was duties, so if we went back to that previous slide with just duties, I still don't know if you were any good. Performance highlight says, yes, this person is pretty good. This other part here is a quote from a client, from a colleague, okay? So it's an endorsement, okay? And so this is just another layer of endorsement and accomplishment, okay? Some people like endorsements, some people don't, and we'll talk about them a little bit more. But if you were to add them, you maybe put them at the bottom of your accomplishment here. Okay, so this is what the whole work experience part would look like for at least one part of a person's resume. Okay, so you have the job title, the description, the accomplishments. Now, the work experience part's the most time-consuming part of writing a resume. So, you're going to have to really sit down and remember and, go back to your files of remembering what you did and what you're proud of, okay? And, it's going to take a couple drafts usually to get this good. But it's the most time-consuming part, but it's also the most rewarding part, because this is the time to reflect on all the awesome things that you've done. Now let's get to education. So as far as education goes, there's 3 different kinds of credentials. You have the degree, education, licenses, and certifications. What I've given you here is examples of how to cite these things. There's not a uniform way of doing it, but usually I recommend these are the pieces that you want when you are citing these things. So if they're applicable to you, feel free to pause and write these down. So here's how it might look on a resume, MBA, Bachelor of Science, selected trainings. You can put the names of the workshops that you've been to. Technical skills, you can put that under here. So that's just one way you can do it. And there's always more than one way to do a resume. Other possible sections, professional affiliations. So those of you who are still in college, you can put, if you're part of like the PRSSA, for example, or the NCA, or the National Forensics League, or the NFA, these are things that you can put on your resume as a professional affiliation, okay? So list those out, put the name of the organization, how many years, and the years that you've been active there. You can do publications, presentations, and patents if you're in a field where that's done. Any kinds of awards or honors. Now, like I said, I prefer that you put your job accomplishments within the job, and then also in your summary. Okay, so in the summary, you can have a career highlights section and you can summarize them there. But if you have accolades that are related to like community service or military or volunteerism or something like that, then I would put those in their own section. And put, because those are kind of separate from work, right? And then let those be separate. There's also a bio section that you can add. Now, this isn't used a lot, but it could be helpful. So a lot of times people call it bio or additional information. And basically, what you would use it for is if there's some other kind of relevant details about you that you think would help your case, even though it's not related to education or experience per se, then this might be a place to put it. So for example, let's say that you're applying for jobs at the Bass Pro Shop and you actually fish a lot yourself, and like you're a big fisher and you are a big enthusiast. Maybe in the additional info section you'd put, you know, avid fishing enthusiast, something like that. You can also put it in your summary too. You can work it in there as well, and then of course in your cover letter too. But some people will make it its own section. Same thing if you have a foreign language or any kind of miscellaneous information that could support your candidacy. And then volunteering. If you do a lot of volunteering, you probably want a section in your resume dedicated to that. And volunteering, what it's good for is showing character. Okay, so I do think volunteer experience has its place. Now, of course, you know, you want to make sure that when you do volunteer experience, you want to put the name of the organization, what your role was in the organization, and the years that you were there doing it. But some people can sell volunteer as a job if they're very involved with it. Okay, so volunteer might be very small. It can also be very big. Okay, it just depends on what you need to sell about yourself for the job that you're applying for. Okay, now we're on to strategies for new graduates. Okay, so here's 3 things that you can do as a college graduate with little experience to sell yourself. Number 1 is you got to sell your education. Okay, now a lot of ways you can do this. Number 1, you of course want to sell your degree. Okay, if you have a good GPA, put your GPA on your resume. Okay, I had a student, he had a 4.0 GPA. It wasn't on his resume. So first time he came in, I was like, what? You need to put your 4.0 on here. Okay, if you do any kind of additional work, your thesis title. But one thing you can sell is your course highlights. Talk about specific courses that you've taken and what you did in those courses. You know, you can talk about particular good things that happened. You know, recognized by creative media professor for strong attention to detail and quick project turnaround. Earned nearly perfect scores in graphic design classes on Adobe, Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. So all of these are little things that you can do to kind of say, look, I got my degree, and by the way, I got it really well too. Look what I did in this class. You can talk about projects that you worked on. So let's say you were doing video production. Talk about some of the video production projects. So you can have key projects. Talk about the projects that you did. Okay? Give us some more information so we know you're not just some college graduate with a degree. You're a college graduate who, during his or her time, really maximized that experience doing projects, really doing well in their courses, and so forth. Because it's not enough just to have a degree. It's also important to show that you maximized your experience getting that degree and really going above and beyond what the degree calls for. Okay? So selling your education is the way to inform and persuade your audience that you're ready for the big time based on your education, that your education prepared you for for your first job in the real world, quote unquote. And here's proof. Secondly, you can sell your extracurricular involvement. So this is where, like, when they tell you, like when you're applying, like when fraternities and sororities are recruiting, like, oh, you can put this on your resume. This is what they're talking about. Okay. Talk about activities that you've been part of that you were preferably an officer in. So like in a sorority, you can talk about the president position that you held, the recruitment chair position that you held, and you can sell it like a job. Okay, and in fact, I had a student, she was very active in her sorority, and it's a big part of her resume. And she's had a lot of success with her resume getting internships just because of her sorority experience alone, because she's done really well with it. Same thing if you start a club or you join a club. What you want to do is not just be part of a lot of clubs as members, but what you really want to do is be really active and lead a club, okay? So maybe join fewer clubs, but be more involved. Be an officer, be a treasurer, be a secretary, be a vice president, be a president. Try to get that leadership experience rather than spreading yourself thin, okay? But sell your extracurricular involvement. Show that you're a well-rounded person who's gone above and beyond just showing up to class, and you've done other things to learn. Thirdly, So you have 3 E's: education, extracurricular involvement, and endorsements. Now I know this one's a little bit more controversial. Some people don't like them on resumes, but I'm going to sell it anyways. Endorsements are basically quotes from people who say that you're awesome, okay? So here's like one, a student worker for a registrar's office, and the director of the registrar's office, has a little quote about Steve. Okay? I think they're cool. Like, I think as long as they're short and they're brief, I think they totally belong on a resume. And references, don't go on a resume, of course, or at least not anymore. But these are a way to kind of at least get a glimpse of other people vouching for you. Okay? So see if you can get an endorsement from somebody, and see if you can get a little quote that you can just put at the top of your resume or at the bottom. Like I said, some people don't like them, but once again, no rules, only preferences. For mid-career professionals, you got to sell your accomplishments. So I know I might have a couple people in my class who may be more mid-career. You're not a college graduate looking for entry-level work, but so you got to sell your accomplishments. Number one, like you need to go back to your past jobs. What are you proud of? You need to put that on your resume, and you need to look at transferable skills from each job. And once you have your degree, use those transferable skills. So these are skills that apply from job A that will apply to job B, and you really want to sell those as well. So when you have years under your belt, what you need to be selling is your past, okay? So older job seekers, their advantage is their experience, is their past, right? You've had 20 years of work, so now you have a track record of some kind, and you want to sell that track record. Really young people, like my college graduates who are going to be 22, have barely walked the face of the earth for as long as some of you have worked, they need to sell their future, okay? They need to sell their potential. Like, look, once you hire me, you're going to have some awesome things. So there's advantages and disadvantages to being young and old on the job market, okay, or older, I should say. But there's ways to capitalize in any situation. So here's the conclusion. Resumes are advertisements, not obituaries. If there's one thing that you can just remember from this whole spiel, resumes are advertisements, not obituaries. You got to sell. You got to sell, sell, sell. Blood makes the grass go, kill, kill, kill. Well, resumes get you hired, sell, sell, sell. Okay? Know the keywords. If you do not want to get passed up in the ATS system, you got to have the keywords in there. Okay? Really qualified people get passed over because of this. And you got to adapt to your audience. Adapt to the job. The whole idea is if you're applying for a job to be offensive lineman, then your resume needs to make you sound like you are an offensive lineman. So you need to talk about offensive lineman things in your resume. It doesn't make sense, if you're trying to be an offensive lineman, to talk about your quarterback rating. Okay? Doesn't make sense to talk about how many field goals you've kicked. It makes sense to talk about blocks, those kinds of things. Okay? So it's very possible, if you have two very different jobs that you're trying to go for, that you might have two different resumes. You might have a resume for sales, and maybe you'll have a resume for accounting. I don't know, whatever jobs that you think you're applying for. And so the degree of difference between the jobs will be equivalent to the degree of difference between the two resumes. So the more different the two jobs are from each other, the more different your resumes should be from each other. So it's a direct correlation between the differences. Okay? So the more focused you are, the more you can just focus on one resume in terms of your career. Okay? So that concludes this lecture. If you have any questions, email me, tweet at me, and let's go from there. Okay? So next lecture will be on design, because design is its own whole other beast. Okay? And hopefully that'll help you once you have your content. It'll help you with presentation.